It's the first album the band recorded in Glasgow in 20 years. So how does it feel? Does it affect the recording process?
I mean, I think it's maybe hard to say how recording in Glasgow affected the process, because I guess like the bigger thing, and we have it's not as if we haven't made any music in Glasgow in those 20 years. But I mean, I guess the thing that really affected the recording process and made things different was the pandemic, because the reason that we stayed in Glasgow when we should have gone to LA to record was because of COVID. So I mean, I guess I feel like in a sense we were really lucky, because obviously it's been a really terrible time for a lot of people, and I mean for us we were fortunate that we had the studio in Glasgow where we could kind of just work and just be home, and I mean really sort of feel pretty safe most of the time. So it was so yeah, it was good. I mean, and I mean for me personally, I've always enjoyed working on music when we've been in Glasgow. I think it's nice just to be in your own neighborhood and still just do a creative job.
You guys definitely have a lot of diversity in your sound, but does a bit of previous mean a little bit of throwback to the old Belle and Sebastian sound?
It wasn't intended that way, or it was something that came up in conversation. It was a phrase that Bob's dad had used, I think it was in the context of seeing a girl out in the street, and he said to Bob, "Did you not have a bit of previous with her?" Meaning she was an ex-girlfriend. And the phrase kind of resonated with Stuart because of his study of Buddhism, and he'd been thinking about kind of past lives and reincarnation. So he thought he was thinking of a bit of previous in the sense of a previous life. In terms of the sound of the record, I think they're definitely, as you say, it is quite diverse, and there's not necessarily hark back, but a song like "Do It For Your Country" maybe has some of the kind of delicacy that we had on the first couple of records, which we maybe haven't done so much of recently.
So Chris, you previously said that the pandemic affected the recording process. Does anything happen to the work have an impact on the recording or songwriting process? Like if they are shooting at you, inspired or somehow inspired by the ongoing war in Ukraine?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was it wasn't, because it was written before before those events happened. But I mean, as you'll know, we did sort of release the track along with a photo montage video to kind of raise money for the Red Cross, because when the war started, it was just around the time we were starting the rollout of promoting the record, and it did make everything to do with music seem quite trivial, But I mean, it's interesting with that song, because I guess the lyrics, even though they're talking about sort of oppression and freedom and stuff, in a way they're maybe quite non-specific, because I kind of said to Stuart recently when we were talking about it, when I first heard the song, I think I assumed that the lyrics were maybe about the kind of African American struggle. Maybe because again, I guess like during the pandemic time, I guess also like the Black Lives Matter movement happened a lot and had a big impact because of the racism in the United States, and I think that's what the song made me think of. But the lyrics don't specifically say that's what it is about, so that was just my own kind of reaction to it. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a fact of life so far, that there's always, in any period of time, there's always injustice in the world somewhere, and there's always people struggling.
I think songs on the new album feel very personal. Was there any sort of mission statement for this one?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I guess the way the band's creative process tends to be, we're more collaborative on the music than on the lyrics, and usually whoever's singing a song wrote the words for it, and usually the kind of writing process on the words is quite personal to the writer. As a band, we don't tend to get into a conversation with with the author of the lyrics around what the meaning of the lyrics is to them. I mean, I think the conversations that we have in the studio when working on the record tend to be much more about the musical aspect of the recording, because that's the aspect that everybody is contributing.
I think the artwork for the album it's great, unique, and also has the classic Belle and Sebastian vibes. Could you tell me more about it and why 4 different covers?
Yeah, so the idea for the artwork was kind of again sort of referring to the title a bit previous. So it's inspired by the kind of like 19th century photos where you see ghost images in the background, and I think people thought they were real ghosts even though it was maybe like double exposures and things like that. So Stuart, who is always the one who, or almost always the one who kind of takes the photos for the sleeves, he had the idea of doing photo shoots in Glasgow locations where you would see somebody in the present day in the photo and then a kind of like half exposed ghost of someone from the someone from the past in the background, hence a bit of previous. So and actually the reason for the multiple covers, it was kind of at the suggestion of the label. It's something that would maybe be a little bit tricky to talk about. So sorry, I actually can't really get into that too much.
Belle and Sebastian has been together for maybe almost 30 years. Do you find the fans are staying with you? Or are you getting younger people coming? Or is it the same age group following you along as you proceed?
I think it's a bit of a mixture. I mean, I think there are people who were fans of the band in the very early days who maybe don't like the direction we've gone in the past 10 or 15 years so much. Then there's people who've been fans since the early days and have stayed with us all the way. And then I think there's like new people come to the band as well, and people for whom maybe some of the more recent stuff is the first stuff they hear, and so they think of us maybe differently to people who've been aware of us since the 90s. So I think we're lucky that it's a mixture. I mean, obviously we've always been a kind of underground band. We've never had a massive audience, but we're very lucky that we've had enough of an audience to be able to keep going and keep making music for the length of time that we have.
In Indonesia, you guys were like one of the gateway bands to indie pop or to hip hop. Like, I can guarantee a lot of people here love Belle and Sebastian. And did you guys know that? And what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the kind of thing you vaguely know it, but don't think about it too much. But I mean, if we are, then it's. I mean, for me, it's nice because a lot of the bands who were my favourite bands growing up were maybe groups like Stereolab and Broadcast and Primal Scream, and they were bands who I loved, like not only for the music they made, but because they were a gateway to like a whole load of other music which I'd not heard. So if we're a band who's kind of fulfilled that role for a generation of people, or some people in a generation, then it's a big honor, definitely.
Any chance you guys are coming back to Indonesia, maybe after the pandemic ends?
I hope so. I mean, we don't have touring plans beyond the end of this year yet, because obviously things have been really up in the air with the pandemic, and we should have done a British tour and a European tour in the early part of this year, which we had to postpone and reschedule. But hopefully once that's out the way, you hope things will be back to normal, and maybe the prospect of a trip to Indonesia would be possible. So I mean, obviously we would really look forward to it when we can.
Okay, thank you, Christopher,
Thanks
for the interview.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.